It is 6:45 in the evening, and the call to prayer is rolling out over water. Not over rooftops, not over streets. Over water, because beneath your feet, if you were standing here, there would be no ground at all. Just stilts driven into a riverbed 6 centuries ago, holding up a village of 10,000 people who have never needed dry land to call this place home. Somewhere behind that village, gold domes catch the last of the sunlight. Somewhere beneath the bay, machinery has been pulling wealth out of the seabed for 100 years. And somewhere in between the two, 450,000 people are living a version of modern life that almost nowhere else on earth resembles. This is Brunei. And the question was never whether this is one of the richest nations on earth. The question is what that wealth is standing on top of. Geographic anchoring. Brunei sits on the northern coast of the island of Borneo, wedged into a small footprint surrounded almost entirely by the Malaysian state of Sarawak, with a short coastline facing the South China Sea. The entire country is smaller than the state of Delaware. Its population is just over 450,000 people, smaller than a mid-sized American city, spread across a nation with one of the highest GDP per capita figures in Asia. This is Brunei Darussalam, the Abode of Peace, and the peace is not a metaphor, it is a policy. Split in two by a sliver of Malaysian territory, Brunei is divided into 4 districts, with Temburong cut off entirely from the mainland, connected only by boat or by the newer bridge completed in 2020. Roughly 2/3 of the population is ethnically Malay, with Chinese, indigenous Dayak, and expatriate communities filling out the rest. Malay is the official language, but English is widely spoken, a holdover from Brunei's decades as a British protectorate before full independence in 1984, one of the last nations in Asia to become fully sovereign in the 20th century. Now the part almost no visitor expects. Brunei has no personal income tax. None. Citizens do not file a return. There is no sales tax on most goods. Healthcare is free. University education, including abroad, is heavily subsidized by the state. Housing loans come with government-backed interest rates so low they are barely worth calculating. How does a country afford this? The answer sits under the South China Sea, in reserves of oil and natural gas that have funded the Sultanate since the 1920s. Brunei Shell Petroleum, a joint venture between the state and Shell, has been the backbone of the national economy for nearly a century. The current ruler, Sultan Hassan al-Bolkiah, has been on the throne since 1967, one of the longest reigning monarchs alive today, and by most estimates, one of the wealthiest individuals on the planet, with a personal fortune built almost entirely on that oil. He exceeded as a young man, still in his early 20s, and has now outlasted more than a dozen changes of government among Brunei's much larger neighbors, becoming in effect the single constant institution of modern Bruneian life. Oil was discovered here in 1929 at a field called Seria on the northwest coast. What followed transformed a small, sleepy sultanate, one that had spent the 19th century steadily losing territory to British and regional pressure, into one of the wealthiest nations per capita on the planet by the late 20th century. But here is a fact that says more about a whole country than any GDP figure. Despite that wealth, average Bruneians are not swimming in luxury. Government jobs, which employ roughly half the workforce, pay modest, stable salaries. The free education and healthcare exists precisely because private wealth, for most citizens, does not. It is a nation where the state absorbs the cost of living so that its people do not have to. There is a quiet structural tension underneath all of it too. Brunei's oil and gas reserves, while still substantial, are finite, and the government has spent years trying to diversify into halal food exports, finance, and tourism. But nothing has yet replaced hydrocarbons as the engine of the system. Let's talk about daily life, because this is where the real texture of a place lives. Food in Brunei carries the flavor of its neighbors. Malay curries thick with coconut milk, Chinese stir-fries born from a long-settled trading community, and dishes found nowhere else, like embuyat, a starchy sago paste eaten by twirling it around a forked bamboo stick called a shandas and dipping it into sour, spicy sauce. It is humble food, communal food, eaten with hands and patience. The climate is equatorial, hot, humid, and wet almost year-round, with rainfall so consistent that Brunei's rainforests never really dry out. Afternoons often bring sudden, heavy downpours that clear within the hour, leaving the streets steaming under a sun that never really sets below 27 degrees Celsius, even at night. Traffic is light by regional standards. This is not Jakarta or Manila. Roads are wide, cars are common. In fact, car ownership per capita is among the highest in the region. And because fuel is heavily subsidized, gas here costs a fraction of what it does almost anywhere else in the world. Public transport, by contrast, is minimal. In Brunei, everyone seems to own a car because almost nobody needs to take a bus. Family structure here still leans heavily traditional and multi-generational. It is common for extended families to live in adjoining homes or compounds. And Friday, the Islamic day of rest, functions as the anchor of the week, built around communal prayer at the mosque and a long, unhurried family lunch afterward. And then there is the water village itself, Kampong Ayer, sprawled across the Brunei River in the shadow of the capital. Bandar Seri Begawan. Roughly 10,000 people live here, in wooden houses connected by kilometers of raised walkways, with schools, mosques, a hospital, and a fire station all built on stilts above the current. Families have lived in the same stretch of water for generations. In some cases, the same physical plot of river for over 500 years, rebuilt and repaired but never abandoned. Boats, not cars, are the way you visit a neighbor. At its peak before land reclamation and urban migration in the 20th century, Kampong Ayer was home to closer to 30,000 people, sometimes described by early European visitors as the Venice of the East. What those visitors often missed is that Kampong Ayer isn't a tourist recreation. It has its own school system, its own mosque, and its own fire brigade, because a fire on stilts is a genuinely different kind of emergency. Yes, this is the part where we talk about what Brunei is known for beyond its wealth, its architecture, and specifically its palace. Istana Nurul Iman is the official residence of the Sultan, and by floor area, it is the largest residential palace on earth, bigger than Buckingham Palace and the Palace of Versailles combined. With over 1,700 rooms, 257 bathrooms, and a banquet hall that can seat 5,000 guests. The building sits on the banks of the Brunei River, its roofline a forest of golden domes visible for miles, positioned so the water village and the palace are always in each other's line of sight. It is not generally open to the public, except for 3 days a year during Eid, when the Sultan opens its doors and Bruneians and visitors are invited to walk through, shake his hand, and receive a small gift. For those 3 days, tens of thousands line up, some for hours for a handshake that lasts a few seconds. Here's the pivot, though, and it matters. The palace is not the story of daily life in Brunei. Most Bruneians will never live anywhere close to that scale. The palace is a symbol of the monarchy's power and legitimacy. And in a country where the Sultan is both head of state and head of government, that symbolism is doing real political work. It is a reminder, standing in gold-domed relief against the skyline, of exactly who holds the authority in this country and how completely. Now, here is a fact that says more about a whole country than any statistic about GDP. In 2014 and more fully in 2019, Brunei implemented a Sharia penal code, a body of Islamic criminal law that runs alongside its civil legal system. The rollout drew international attention and, in some cases, condemnation, particularly over penalties tied to matters like alcohol consumption and personal conduct. Under pressure, much of it internal to how the laws were actually being applied, the Sultan later clarified a de facto moratorium on the most severe punishments, including capital punishment for these specific offenses, which by his own public statement remains extended to this day. What this means for daily life is more mundane, and in some ways more telling. Alcohol is banned for sale within the country, a policy dating back to 1991. Bars, in the way most of the world understands them, simply don't exist here. For a country its size, that is a striking absence. Nightlife here does not look like nightlife in Kuala Lumpur or Singapore, its nearest urban neighbors. Instead, evenings revolve around family, food markets, mosques, and the water. The real nightlife happens at the Pasar Malam, night markets, where stalls sell grilled skewers, fresh coconuts, and sticky Malay desserts to families strolling in the cooler evening air. A different definition of a night out, built around food and community. This is the trade Brunei has made, and it is worth sitting with rather than judging from a distance. Near total economic security and social order in exchange for a level of state and religious oversight over private life that few nations outside the Gulf attempt. Whether that trade feels like peace or like constraint depends entirely on who you ask. And Brunei, notably, does not make it easy for outsiders to ask. Here is where the armchair daydream becomes a spreadsheet. A liter of gasoline in Brunei costs a fraction of the regional average, thanks to subsidies funded by that same oil wealth. Healthcare visits are effectively free for citizens, and university students accepted into government scholarship programs, a substantial share of each graduating class, can have their entire education, including in the UK, Australia, or the US, paid for in full, plus a living stipend. Rent in Bandar Seri Begawan is modest by Southeast Asian capital city standards, and government-backed home loans available to citizens come with interest rates that make home ownership achievable on an ordinary civil servant's salary. But imported goods, anything not produced domestically, which is most consumer products, carry a premium because Brunei imports the vast majority of what it consumes beyond oil and gas. Brunei grows only a small fraction of its own food. Rice, vegetables, and most fresh produce arrive by ship or truck from Malaysia and beyond, which means grocery prices for anything outside of local staples run noticeably higher than the subsidized essentials. The cheapness of some things and the cost of others tell you the shape of an economy built on a single resource, subsidized where the state wants stability, expensive where global supply chains take over. There is also a quieter number worth sitting with. A large share of Brunei's actual labor force, the workers who build the roads, staff the construction sites, and fill many lower-wage service jobs, are foreign migrant workers, largely from Indonesia, the Philippines, and Bangladesh, who are not citizens and do not receive the same subsidies, healthcare access, or protections that Bruneians do. The comfortable economy described in every headline about Brunei's wealth is, in practice, a two-tier system, and the second tier rarely appears in the postcard version of the country. Now, the sobering part, because every place has one, Brunei's press is tightly controlled. Freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, and political dissent are heavily restricted. There is no meaningful electoral opposition to the monarchy. Brunei's legislative council is appointed, not elected, and the country has not held a general election since the 1960s. Criticism of the royal family carries serious legal risk under sedition and lese majesti provisions that remain on the books and are, on occasion, actively enforced. Human rights organizations have repeatedly raised concerns about the treatment of LGBTQ individuals under the 2019 legal code, even accounting for the moratorium on capital punishment and about restrictions on religious practice for the country's small Christian and Buddhist minorities, who face limits on public worship and construction of new places of worship that Muslim institutions do not. This is not a secret hidden from view. It is openly documented by international bodies, openly debated in foreign press, and openly denied or minimized by the Bruneian state, which maintains that its laws reflect the values and consensus of its own population rather than an external standard imposed on it. For travelers, the practical danger is low. Brunei has one of the lowest violent crime rates in the region, and petty theft, scams, and street crime, the kinds of dangers that dominate warnings for many Southeast Asian destinations, are genuinely rare here. But the deeper caution isn't about street safety. It's about understanding that the calm here is, in part, enforced, and that the same tight social control that keeps the streets quiet also keeps certain conversations, certain lifestyles, and certain freedoms firmly off the table. Now, something lighter, because Brunei is not only its politics. 3/4 of Brunei is covered in primary rainforest. Untouched, unlogged, some of the oldest continuous forest ecosystems in Southeast Asia, part of the same ancient Bornean rainforest system that scientists estimate may be over 130 million years old, older than the Amazon. Ulu Temburong National Park, accessible mainly by longboat up narrow jungle rivers, is often called the Green Jewel of Brunei. A canopy walkway suspended high above the forest floor, a network of aluminum towers and swaying bridges rising over 50 meters into the air, puts visitors eye level with hornbills and gibbons, in a stretch of rainforest so intact that biologists still catalog new species of insects, plants, and amphibians here on a regular basis. Below the canopy, the forest floor holds its own quieter wonders. Leaf-mimicking insects, carnivorous pitcher plants clinging to riverbanks, and, if you're patient and lucky, a glimpse of a proboscis monkey, a species found almost nowhere on Earth outside Borneo. Because Brunei never needed to log its forests for revenue, the oil did that job instead. The country accidentally became one of the best-preserved rainforest ecosystems left on the planet, even as its immediate neighbors, Malaysia and Indonesia, cleared vast stretches of their own share of Borneo for palm oil and timber. Wealth in this one case protected wilderness instead of consuming it, an outcome almost nobody planned, and one that Brunei has more recently started to actively promote as a form of ecotourism and long-term conservation policy. If this country is going to pull you in, here is where to put your feet first. Start in Bandar Seri Begawan, the compact, quiet capital, home to the golden-domed Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin Mosque, one of the most photographed buildings in Southeast Asia, set beside its own artificial lagoon, with a replica 16th-century royal barge floating on the water. Nearby sits Kampong Ayer itself, best explored by hiring a small water taxi and simply asking the driver to show you around. Most will happily narrate as they go, pointing out the oldest homes, the fire station, and the best angle for photographing the palace from the water. From there, the Royal Regalia Museum offers a rare, controlled glimpse into the monarchy's ceremonial life. Golden chariots used in coronation processions, jeweled crowns, ceremonial swords, and gifts presented to the Sultan by foreign heads of state over decades. It is free to enter, and it is one of the only places in the country where the monarchy's private world is deliberately put on public display. For nature, Ulu Temburong requires a short boat trip across the bay to the separate Temburong district, followed by a long boat ride upriver. Plan a full day and expect to get wet, since the river crossings and jungle trekking involved are part of the experience rather than an inconvenience to avoid. For food, head to Gadong Night Market in the evening, where the density of stalls, the smoke off the satay grills, and the sheer volume of families out for dinner will tell you more about ordinary Bruneian life in 20 minutes than most guidebooks manage in a chapter. And for something few visitors know to look for, the Jeradong Park area holds the quiet, faded grandeur of a royal amusement park built in the 1990s at enormous expense, once home to acts and attractions rivaling anything in the world at the time. Now a strange, half-forgotten monument to a different era of Bruneian ambition. A reminder that even a country built on careful control has at times indulged in spectacle. So here is the mirror. Brunei is a nation that solved almost completely the economic anxieties that define so much of the modern world: housing, healthcare, education, debt. And in exchange, it asks its people to live within tightly drawn lines, set by a monarchy that has ruled largely unquestioned for over half a century. It is not a dystopia. It is not a paradise. It is a specific, deliberate bargain, still being negotiated in real time between a government and a population of 450,000 people who mostly seem to have made their peace with it, even as the oil that funds the entire arrangement quietly counts down toward its own expiration. Stand on the walkways of Kampong Ayer at dusk, with the golden domes of the palace glowing across the water and the sound of the evening prayer drifting over both. And the contradiction isn't abstract anymore. It's the whole skyline. 600 years of village life on one side of the river, a palace with more rooms than Versailles on the other. Both still standing, both still occupied, both somehow the same country. Maybe the real question isn't whether Brunei is rich. It's whether you'd trade the freedom to complain about your government for a country that never sends you a tax bill, and whether that trade would still feel worth it decades from now when the oil finally runs out.